We begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and that is with Allah's signature, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. We begin also by giving all praise and adequate praise to the creator, the evolver, and the sustainer of all systems of knowledge. We thank Allah for being with you on this Saturday, December 11th, 2021. I am your Imam for this evening, your instructor, Benjamin Bilal, and I welcome all of you, especially those who are listening for the first or second or third time especially. I welcome all of you with the hearty greetings given in the Qur'an as Salamun alaykum. And thank you once again for being with us, and thank you for your patience. So as our senior instructor, Ahmed Hassan, mentioned to you, this is actually a new channel that we're calling WDM Central. And if you're not familiar with those initials, they stand for Wallace D. Mohammed. So this will be the site that you can come to every Thursday evening, inshallah, at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to get your weekly dose of understanding pertaining to the language and logic of the leadership in the world that came to and through a man whose name is Wallace D. Mohammed, otherwise known as Warith Deen Mohammed. So if you're not understanding who that is, you're going to get your dose of that reality before tonight's class is over. Now, this is not a come worship WD Muhammad type party that you've been invited to. This is an understanding of the tremendous gift of wisdom and understanding that has come not only to, but through Imam W.D. Muhammad to you and I, the intended recipients of his level of logic and wisdom and understanding and expression. The intended audience is all of us. And when I say all of us, I'm not just talking about so-called black folk. I'm not just talking about so-called African Americans. I'm not just talking about the ones whom Imam Muhammad himself designated with the name Bilalian after Bilal ibn Rabah of Muslim history. We're talking about people who carry within themselves the genuine seeds of human interest, human kindness, human interaction, which when carried out properly represents the augmentation of human values, human concerns, and ultimately human salvation. Those are the people who represent our main audience. Any subsidiary groups of that, ethnically speaking, gender-wise speaking, or anything else that you've subdivided yourself into that's not necessarily what human beings represent as a whole, we welcome you also. But just understand that you're not the intended audience. The intended audience are those of you out there who identify with being true human, Human. Now, as a process note, I don't want you to come to this teleconference or this channel or a webinar or this site for entertainment purposes. The word entertainment is a very wicked and deceitful word, which was invented by the linguistic social manipulators as a way of preserving the knowledge throughout their generations for how to rule over masses of uninformed people. That's what the word entertainment was invented to imply. Let's break that word down. To enter is to come into. To come into. If you were with us for the previous class, you remember that I told you that all languages carry masculine information and also feminine principled information. Masculine principled information is designed to come out of one place and enter into another place for purposes of changing the internal structure of that which it entered. So it's based on the principle in nature related to the male's sperm, which comes out of himself and enters into a feminine entity called the womb of the woman. And in the womb of the woman, the sperm is actually able to emit a particular chemical substance that will then become responsible for changing the internal structure of that woman's condition, at least temporarily. It's called a pregnancy. So it's the same thing with language. There are social manipulators in this world who are actually impregnating the minds and the spirits and the emotionality of people. People who are actually unaware that they're even being impregnated by these forces, by these conditions that are actually changing their conditions to become part and parcel of what the people who inseminated them intends for them to be. So if the social manipulators intend for us to be goody-goody and to be moral-minded, then they emit certain frequencies through language into the cultural environment, into the social environment, that then go to work to make sure that we are thinking 24/7 about moral issues, moral concerns. But to the contrary, if the social manipulators who have their puppet strings operating at all times over the minds and souls of the masses of people, when they decide that society should now be headed towards a downhill trajectory in terms of behavior and attitude and in terms of emotionality, they want to send whole groups of people into depression, for instance. Or they want to send whole groups of people into frivolous life, into joke time, Comedy Central time. They just want everything in life now to be one big joke. Then they accentuate the people in the society who represent their best comedians. So that most of what we have to think about on a daily basis is going to be wrapped around the latest thing that Richard Pryor said, or that, whatever the popular comedian is out there. Whatever they say, that's what we go to work with on our minds. That's what we go to school with. Hey, man, did you hear what so-and-so said? He had a concert and 10,000 people, and he told someone, let me tell you this nasty thing nasty joke that and they preoccupy us with that level of condescending frequency to the point where it becomes our daily commentary on life itself. And life is no longer seen as something serious in the way that the source creator created it. Life itself becomes a joke. Or as that song says, life is but a dream. Those are the people who want you to row your boat gently down the stream. In this case, it's going to be the stream that we call media. You know how you stream things across the internet? That's the stream that they have all of us on right now. And they want all of us to be merrily, not paying a bit of attention because we're asleep. And that's the reason why life is but a dream. But it's time to wake up. And the first awakening is through the understanding of language and how language is formed. So entertainment begins with an entering, and an entering is to come into. That's another way of saying impregnate, isn't it? We just changed the C-O-M-E to C-U-M. And when you come into the female, there's the chance that you're going to impregnate her if the conditions favor that particular union. Boy, you don't understand how this society has been built. The majority of the coming into now is done through your computer. There's so much filthy stuff coming through your computer that is impregnating millions of minds, billions of minds across this planet as we speak, so that the life that is born out of the people who are paying attention, extreme attention, to what's coming across the computer screen, the majority of that information is impregnating people with some of the most wicked or weakest ideas that have ever surfaced upon the planet we call Earth to our knowledge. Just to take that a step further, when they named it a computer, what were they saying? They were saying that they were designing information that was to come into the pewter. Now, if you don't know what pewter is, you have to go to the people who speak Espanol and just ask them what the puta is. Yeah, it wasn't nice in junior high and high school to be called a puta, especially if you were a male. Because that's a slang word for hoe. And I hope you understand that. So now this is not nasty. We're talking science here. Be patient. And even if your children are listening, they can handle this, trust me, especially with the onslaught of negative information, vibration, and frequencies that they have been sucking on almost since birth. This is the anecdote. And sometimes you have to put a little something in the anecdote that also represents some of that poison, because it needs to be assimilated. It needs to be identified and then extracted from the system. They do the same thing with these so-called vaccines. They put a little of the flu in the flu vaccine, don't they? All right. But I promise you, there's nothing that we're going to be sharing with you as information that's going to be responsible for your moral decline. All of it is designed to elevate the moral and rational properties of every true human within listening range. So the computer, that name is designed to speak to how they inseminate the minds of the public that they consider to be their personal whores. And we're at that time of year where we can say, ho, ho, ho. Imam Mohammed taught on that years ago. He showed us in the Bible where it says, ho, ho. And it was a reference to the prostitutional nature of two major societies. You had the society of ancient Babylon or Babylon, and you also had the society of manipulators called ancient Egypt. And those were the two whores. In fact, Babylon, they spoke about the whores of Babylon, that Babylon had turned itself into a whorish society. People went into Babylon for manipulation purposes. People went into Babylon just to see how many extra dollars could be made. And they did the same thing by usurping the knowledge of ancient Egypt. That knowledge is now left on the walls of ancient Egypt as what are called the hieroglyphs. And if you think hiero is not related to horo, you're sadly mistaken. We're talking consonantal connections tonight, y'all. Pay attention. Even if you've never heard this or heard this for the first or second time, I promise you, you're going to understand the gist of it, if nothing else, before tonight is done. Be very patient tonight. Again, this is not for people who have short attention spans. This is not for people who are not in the habit of taking notes. I speak slowly enough for you to catch certain words, for you to write down. If you're not understanding what they are, I depend on you to ask me that question at the end of the session. Instructor, what did you mean by computer? Could you explain that again? And I will, to your satisfaction. So entertainment means to enter the tain. What is T-A-I-N? The word tain means twain. And twain means two. It's Old English for two. Just like you have the word Mark Twain. You remember that author? Yeah, well, he represents two marks. Just like the Bible speaks about the two whores, ho, ho. And Imam Muhammad said that the third ho is represented by modern day America, because modern day America actually represents modern day Babylon as well as modern day Egypt. And the secrecies and the tricks of the trade were passed on from Babylon to the society that we now know as ancient Greece. And therefore, ancient Greece was able to partner about 5,000 or so years ago with ancient Egypt. And they became a force in the world to be reckoned with. And they went forth to wreck the entire world through the usage, the sophisticated usage of language. So your modern day holes are the two holes of ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. And Imam Mohammed stated that America is simply the uniting of those two psychologies. The psychology that was established in ancient Greece and the psychology that was established also prior to that in ancient Egypt. I hope you're following me. So where's that third hole? It's to be found in modern day America. And if you don't think there are people in this world who are tricking, and when I say tricking, I'm talking about in the prostitute sense of the word, tricking the hell out of people as we speak. They are ripping people off for trillions of dollars as we speak, right up under our noses, because they have the average one of us either mesmerized by their entertainment, or they have us under the rule of the F word. And the F word that's worse than the F word that you're thinking about, that F word is fear. Fear, F-E-A-R. That's worse than the other F word that you're thinking about. So they enter your tane or your twain. There's something about you that represents two things that they are entering into. What are they entering into? The last syllable in the word entertainment. Ment is short for mental. And mental, as you all know, has to do with the mind. So entertainment, therefore, is actually speaking to the science of how to enter into the two chambers of the human mind. There are two chambers related to the human mind. Let's talk about what they are. Those who are providing you with entertainment, they have found a way to enter into the two chambers of what is called the human psyche. Psyche. And the ancient Egyptians were masters at understanding the human psychic makeup. In fact, they, according to history, were the first ones to establish what is called in the world now psychology. Sigmund the Fraud, he had to go to ancient Egypt to study. Carl Jung had to go to ancient Egypt to study. The other people who established other aspects of what is called now modern Western psychology, B.F. Skinner to boot, Pavlov, all of these people had to go study the language and the psychology left in ancient Egypt in order to be able to modify it, bring it back, and use it for their manipulative purposes. You have to understand the human psyche. The ancient Egyptians saw the psyche as being the soul, not the mind per se, but the soul that we spoke about last week, the soul. What does the psyche rule over? The psyche is not your conscious mind, and your conscious mind is not what your soul is. Your conscious mind is merely the sentinels, the angels, if you will, that are guarding the front entrance of the psyche. The psyche is actually your subconscious mind. There is your conscious mind, the guards at the door that will lie to you if it thinks you're coming in to interrupt the party and tell you that there is no party. Everyone's gone home. What do you mean? Yeah, I know you see the lights on. That's the sanitation people cleaning up after the party. Come back next week. We might have another one. This is what the conscious mind does. It tries to divert you in many cases. It tries to get what you got. If it can't do that, it will lie to you. It will steal from you. It will fabricate stories and narratives to get you to see it their way. That's what the conscious mind does potentially. That's not what it was intended to do, but that's what it ends up doing when it is manipulated away from its original trajectory, which is supposed to be truth and justice. That is what the conscious mind's attention is supposed to be paid towards. Establishing truth and justice for all, not just for some, for all. But that's just 10% of your brain's capacity. The majority of your brain is located in the area which controls your subconscious motivations and drives. So there's the conscious mind, that little 10%, 5 to 10% of the brain's activity that controls conscious thoughts, things that are consciously paid attention to. But then there is that part of the brain that when the conscious mind pays attention to a thing that it thinks is important enough to capture, contain, and control, then it relegates that conscious perception to the bank. It puts that wealth of information in its bank. And in psychology, we call it the memory bank. The memory bank is located in the subconscious regions of the mind, or the brain, as they say. So the subconscious mind is the largest portion of the brain's activity. And I'm equating the brain with the mind, although we do know that they are two different animals, literally two different animals. But for the sake of understanding, when I interchange the mind and the brain, just understand that I'm doing that for people who think on that level and who have been taught on that level. The mind is much more expansive and extensive than the physical brain. And if I were to cut this physical brain open or allow it to be cut open in brain surgery or whatever, you're not going to see my mind pour out, because this physical thing cannot contain what Allah has established as the human being's mental capacity. But again, just for simplicity's sake, see the two as being the same. So again, there are some sophisticated manipulators in this world who have learned how to enter into the two chambers of the mind. That's entertainment. Those two chambers are your emotions and your memory. That's what your subconscious mind is substantially. It involves those things that are affected emotionally in you, meaning how you feel about the things. Every single idea that comes through any of your five senses, it first manifests itself upon your feelings. And your feelings are literally connected to your central nervous system, which runs up and down your spine. So the lower part of the brain, called the cerebellum, is literally connected to the top portion of the spine. And alongside the spine, that bony spine, are nerves, which science calls your central nervous system. So anything and everything that pounces upon those five basic senses as something you see, something you hear, something you taste, something you touch, or something you smell, it first manifests as a feeling in you. If it becomes a significant enough feeling in you, then your feelings will hand that sensation, that vibration, and that frequency up to the higher register, so that the mind can begin to entertain, if you will, what that information actually is. The mind has the ability to piece that thing apart, to enter into the two aspects of that information, negative, positive, and begin to disseminate it in a way which becomes useful to the person. You throw away that which is nonsensical. You get rid of that which doesn't really have much merit, and you hold on to that which can be responsible for the further movement of your human life up the ladder of excellence. So that's the good entertainment. Not the conspirator version. That's the Fitrah-based version of entertainment on the natural level, when something can enter you and you then deliver it to the two chambers of moral and rational investigation and application, so that it works for you and not against you. That's the true meaning. Now, emotions and memory, as we stated, are actually properties of the subconscious mind. The conscious mind controls conscious thought. The subconscious mind controls emotional and memory-based feelings. And the more impactful an idea is on your emotions, the more substantial is going to be the impact upon your memory bank. If you were in a car crash or witnessed a car crash, if your divorce was very, very painful for you to have to go through, or on the positive side, if your marriage was so much of a happy event that you remember almost every detail of it 10 years, 25, 50 years later, you're still talking about, yeah, the day my baby proposed, and how the wedding was and the honeymoon. You remember all of that because it was very heavily impactful upon your emotions. Emotions and memory are related. They're wedded to each other. But it's all taking place in the subconscious region of the brain. That part of the brain is called the limbic brain, Limbic, also known as the mammalian brain, meaning the brain that every single mammal that Allah has created on this earth, they have this same brain like you do. None of those mammals have the neocortex brain that controls your conscious thinking that we spoke about earlier. Only the human being has a substantial neocortex, which is responsible for making moral and rational decisions. Do you remember the character called Neo? I think they have a new Matrix coming out. Did we get tickets for that yet? You need to keep up with these movies. They tell you more truth than the daily news. And in the Matrix, which is simply a code word for matrix or tricking Ma, who is Mama nature. The Matrix is a very seriously sophisticated treatment of the necessary language for tricking the Fitrah. And Allah says in the Qur'an, do not make any alterations on his Fitrah. It is the Fitrah of Allah, meaning it is the patterned way in which Allah keeps the peace amongst all of the various creatures he created. He created the Fitrah as their support. He created the Fitrah as their school classroom. The Fitrah is your classroom. The Fitrah is your first instructor. Mother Nature is your first mother. Mother Nature teaches you before your physical mother is able to teach you. Who taught you how to suck milk? Was it your mother? No. Who taught your hair how to grow? Was it your mother? No. Who taught your nails? Who taught your bones how to grow? How you are able to become taller and wider and come into language? Did your mother teach you all of that? Really? Did your mother give you the mouth to be able to form these sounds? Baba, mama, dada. Did your mother do? Really? No, it was your mother called nature, the Fitrah, that Allah himself put his divine instructions into and told nature, here's how you teach every single human that comes into this planet. So nature was your first teacher. Mother was your secondary teacher. And that's why we say Alhamdulillah and not Alhamdulillah or Ma or Mama or Dad or whoever. There's nobody after that Alhamdu except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Highly glorified is Allah above all else. So the masters of entertainment among the conspirators, they enter the two chambers, the 10 chambers of the human psyche called emotions and memory. And they do it in order to reach that platform called your mental capacity, the ment. That is entertainment. The objective is to reach the mental part, the part that controls moral and rational thinking, the part that deals with rational differentiations and implementations of decisions that are made. These manipulators ultimately want to be in control of your decision making. They want to be able to make important decisions for you because they do not trust your true human capacity to make the right decisions. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, read the story of Iblis and his contention with the pronouncement on the part of Allah that he was going to create a Khalifa fil ard, a caretaker, custodian as it's called, in the earth. And Iblis had a hissy fit behind that proclamation, because he thought, because he was created from nar, from fire, that he was supposed to be the de facto ruler in the world, because he saw himself as lighting up the world, giving the world warmth and adequate temperature, etc., etc., etc. He saw himself as being the dispenser of rational light, scientific investigation. He was going to bring the world into rationality as he perceived it, and he was going to be in the world controlling the flow of rational implementation of knowledge, where knowledge should be dispersed and how knowledge should be applied scientifically. And in the process, he developed a ton of pseudo-scientific ideas that are now masquerading as the science. Follow the science, so says Dr. Fauci and others. We have to follow, and then they just go on to invent new versions of that science, which in reality are pseudo-science. If it were science, it should be supported by Allah's fitrah. It should be supported by the way things are formed naturally and the way that the source creator has created things to function naturally. Do human babies come here through male on top of male, or female lying besides female? Can that produce a new introduction of life into the world? If not, then that lifestyle and those activities are not indicative of what the fitrah supports. Forget what your religion supports. Forget what your personal ideology supports. We're talking about what is supported by Mother Nature herself. If it's not supported by Mother Nature, guess what? It's going to be eventually swept off of the earth. The Qur'an speaks about it as the earthquake, the great quaking of the earth. Allah says one day the earth itself will experience a quaking, and the people will have to say, what in the world has gotten into her? But you have to understand what the earth represents symbolically in order to understand that. Don't think it's talking about just some physical earth shake or quake. That's been happening for millions of years. The zilzal that the Qur'an is speaking of, the zigzagging of those frequencies, that's happening on a whole nother level, and it's happening again as we speak. But you have to understand what the earth is, and you have to understand what causes the earth to quake. Its centers need to be realigned. They are out of sync with each other. The puzzle pieces are not fitting properly as they used to. And that's evident. If you take a male and put him with a male sexually, those are two of the exact same puzzle pieces. They're not going to interlock. And because they're not interlocking, the puzzle is not going to give you the fullness of the picture that you desire. The picture we're talking about is true human life. You can't take two of the same pieces, and fill out the puzzle. Let's continue. When Muslims greet each other, we greet each other with a term that is related to the word Muslim, and that is the term Salaam. We can say Salamun also, but there's nowhere, no place in the Qur'an that gives the greetings as As-salam alaykum. The only as-salam in the Qur'an is the attribute of the source creator himself. He calls himself as-salam, or the source of what they call peace. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there's nowhere in the Qur'an where we're asked to give a greeting to another human being by using that particular attribute of Allah. Does Allah ask us to greet the people by saying Ar-Rahman alaykum? Choose any of the so-called 99 attributes and see if you can find in the Qur'an where Allah asks us to greet each other as humans, beginning with one of his divine attributes. You won't find it. Don't waste your time. So why would the greetings Assalamu alaikum be in the Qur'an? Do you know what a burden that would be for you to have to be obligated by As-Salam, the source of peace? You'd crumble under the weight of that responsibility. Alaikum means you're responsible for it. Alaikum means that it obligates you. How can As-Salam obligate a human? Allah can only be obligated upon his own abilities and his own self. As he says, his own mercy obligates him. That's in the Qur'an. That's why he's Ar-Rahman. He can be obligated as a rule that he establishes for his own self. But the human being is not obligated by what God is. How are you going to stand in the place of God and do what God does? That's called the shirk. It's a mild form, but it's nevertheless related to shirk, the establishment of gods besides the original and source creator of all. So this word salam, transliterated as S-A-L-A-A-M, is translated as peace, P-E-A-C-E. But peace is its secondary meaning. Its secondary meaning. And sometimes when we say peace, we throw up two fingers. You remember that symbol? Peace, brother, right? It's a secondary meaning. The initial meaning for salam is wholeness or completion, completeness. So this dua that we give as salamun alaikum, which is in the Qur'an, on more than one occasion, you can find Salamun alaikum, or you can simply say Salam alaikum, same thing. It literally is a dua, a prayer for the people to complete themselves, not just to be at peace, because the job that completing yourself entails is going to bring you naturally into a state of submission to the peace. As your life continues to unfold and present to you challenges and opportunities that you're then able to lock into other things that you've learned and places you want to go, and you begin to make cogent plans that make sense to the brain, and you begin to plan out your life by saying, by 2023, I want to be this place. By 2025, I want to have achieved these things. And you begin to use your life as a giant puzzle board by establishing pieces that fit or interlock into each other. The purpose of all of these interlocking pieces that go into what we will eventually call our life, the purpose of those pieces is to eventually present to the world, but to yourself first, a complete picture. You know how it was working on those puzzles? Crossword puzzle or picture puzzle. The purpose in putting all of those disconfigured and misconfigured and sometimes not properly fitting, so you have to try another space for that. The purpose of it all was to end up with the full picture, the complete picture, the whole picture of whatever that was the puzzle was attempting to present to you. Well, that's how life is, and that's what being a Muslim submitting to the peace is. It's not just you saying Salam alaikum or La ilaha illallah. It's not some ethnic or some so-called religious mantra. Salam has nothing to do with you as an ethnic group, whether you're from Indonesia, Pakistan, Egypt, wherever, Sudan, it doesn't matter. Muslim has nothing at all to do with the region of planet Earth that you happen to be born in, grown up in, or situated in. Muslim has to do with the ability in your soul to submit to being a part of something that Allah naturally intended for you to fit into snugly and comfortably like a puzzle piece. So when you go into a particular town, the first thing you want to know is, what are the laws and the rules and the regulations in this city or this town? Because I don't want to violate. I want to enter this town in submission to the overall good. So anywhere you go where your conscious mind is concentrating on what the rules and the regulations are, what are the edicts, what are the stipulations for being in this particular region at this particular time, dealing with these particular people, what are their rules for economic trade, what are their rules for political governance, what are their rules for the public display of what they might consider to be an immoral behavior on my part, something I'm used to doing in Greece, but if I go to the Sudan, so you're supposed to first be intelligent enough to find out what the rules and regulations are and then submit to them for as long as you're in that space. That's what Muslim means. And that's what Salaam is designed to encourage. And if we can keep doing that as we traverse the earth, and we can continue to interlock our peace with the peace that fits in that part of the world, with the peace that is respected by that particular ethnicity, by the peace that is supported by that particular governmental legislation, and we don't have any problems interlocking with that particular ordinance. If we continue to do that, that's the challenge for humanity, to find those aspects of other people's culture, other people's way of life, other people's lifestyles, and not become assimilated, but to become respective of what has historically been responsible for establishing themselves as a people independent of the majority, but whose life structure and lifestyle is supportive of what they believe the source creator is pleased with. I'm not talking about the establishment of vice and corruption and submitting to that. We're supposed to fight against that. A people standing for justice for all, as we mentioned. But when there are aspects of their life and culture and ideas and mores that are consistent with ours, then we're supposed to try to interlock with those ideas. And that will be Muslim meeting Muslim, meeting Muslim. But it doesn't mean that all of those people are making what's called as-salah or zakah or siyam. You know these terms, Muslims. That's not what it means. Anybody can be a Muslim if they want to. And you can be a Muslim one day and be not mindful of being a Muslim the next day. And for as long as you're not mindful and not following the protocol and not being conducive to the behavior of what a Muslim is known to be as a peacemaker, when you break that peace, you are no longer a Muslim. So it's not your shahada that makes you and keeps you a Muslim. It's your mind and your behavior, which establishes a particular attitude in you. And the longer you hold on to the proper attitude, eventually Allah is going to elevate you up to the proper altitude. If your attitude is not correct, you will never reach the altitude intended for you. So if Salaam means completeness, if Salaam has to do with the urge in me for wholeness, then what is it about myself that needs to be completed or that needs to be made whole or united? The answer to that question is in what the consonants which form the word Salaam represent. Oh, we're about to go a little bit deeper into the deep sea diving. Put your snorkels on. Put your goggles on. Be ready. Lane's Free Lexicon states that the verb Salima, from which the word Salam, Muslim, and Islam are derived. Salima is the verb Salima. And it is from the three consonants Sin, Lam, Mim. Listen to what it means and listen carefully. It means safety, security, freedom, immunity. It means to escape, Now, in the way that we use it when we greet each other, we say that it means salutation. Salutation. Salutation has to do with saluting people. When you salute people, it means that you are respecting and responding to their authority in that place you happen to be in. Yeah, that's what a salute is. And by the way, the English word salute comes from the Arabic word salat, just as the English word salt comes from the Arabic word salat. And what did we tell you salt was responsible for? Preserving the integrity of things, such as meats and fish and all of the things that the seafarers used to have to travel for miles and miles and days on the sea in order to deliver to the shore. So I told you that all words that carry the SL consonants have to do with the preservation of a thing's integrity. So salat is preserving the integrity of your Muslim life, preserving the integrity of your relationship, your close relationship with your source creator. A salute is preserving the integrity of the relationship between the common officer and the superior officer, if we're talking military talk. So this is saying that Salaam, Salima, is also related to the idea of a salutation, giving respect to a higher cause, to a higher force, to a higher power. Salima, they say that it's a greeting. They say that it means peace. They also say that it means to acknowledge, to pay in advance. How about that one? To submit. It means sincerity. It means humility. All of this is related to the 3 root letters that form the word salam. And mostly it means to be in sound condition. To be in sound. We usually speak about the mind as being sound. Are you of sound mind to make this decision? Yes, Your Honor. They say sound mind and body. Boy, if the body part was put into most of our equations, we'd fail miserably. Some of us are sound mentally. Some of us are sound emotionally, and that's a smaller section. But how many of us are sound mentally, emotionally, and bodily speaking? Very few of us are going to make the grade. So that lets you know where the work is to be done. Salima also means to be well without blemish, to be gentle, tender. Listen to this now. Soft, elegant. So how can you give that greetings to somebody and then commit to blessing them out or backbiting them? Assalamu alaikum, akh. Or trying to get something from them that's not yours. Trying to sweet talk one of the sisters out of something. Maybe out of one of her body parts. Assalamu alaikum, sister. Yes, assalamu alaikum, ukhti. And what he ain't telling you is he got a bunch of ukhtis at home in the form of maybe 4 wives that he took and 2 more that he didn't tell those other 4 about. And then he might have 4 or 5 daughters on top of that scattered throughout the country. But his insatiable appetite for wanting more and more wives and more women and more feminine body parts to play with causes him to fake and fictionalize his way through life. Under the greetings, assalamu alaikum, sister. And it works the other way also. Assalamu alaikum, brother. You know that voice. So the last meaning for Salima in the dictionary is related to the prophet Solomon, called Sulaiman in the Qur'an. The Bible calls him Solomon. Great wisdom in that name. Solomon. And some say that it represents the soul of man. Solomon represents the soul of man, or what makes man soul or one. S-O-L-E, soul or one. Let's look at that for a moment. This name Suleiman, or Solomon as it's given to us, is actually a play on what the combination of the symbols sun, S-U-N, which in Latin is called sol, S-O-L, and the symbol of the moon, M-O-O-N, represent. Solo, that's sol, mon, that's related to moon. So Solomon is a play on the combination of the sun and the moon. What is the sun in this terminology and explanation? The sun represents the rational mind. I'm giving you the language and logic of Imam W. Mohammed. Hold on to your kufis and your khimars. The sun, I repeat, S-U-N, represents the human rational mind, which establishes appropriate social behaviors and norms. Now, did Imam Muhammad tell it to you like that? No. He gave you hints and clues, and it is our job to comb through those hints and clues and establish, as he said, the truest meanings for what he was attempting to tell us. What did he tell us about the sun? He said it was a symbol of social logic. So what's the purpose of social logic? The purpose of social logic is to establish the appropriate boundaries for our social behavior and norms. See, you'll do a lot more that you think you can get away with if the environment is dark. You think you can get away with stuff because you think people can't see you. But you're less likely to do things in the light of day that you know are going against the grain of social mores, social norms, social habits, social behaviors that have become established in the full light of day amongst particular groups of people. You're not just going to go among people and do things that they can see you doing that you know are violating their social norms. So the sun became a symbol of how the rational mind evaluates social behaviors and social etiquette, social norms. Make sense? So what does the moon represent in this analogy? The moon, on the other hand, represents not the rational mind, but the emotional mind. The emotional mind, which encourages contemplation, deep thinking on things. The emotional mind, which encourages meditation, the slowing down of the frequencies long enough to begin to evaluate individual sections of one's own behavior and attitude. You know, just kind of talking to yourself after a while when you meditate. And things will come up out of your subconscious memory bank to cause you to reevaluate things that you did, that because you were so busy moving and grooving and trying to make a deal and trying to make a buck and a dollar and all of that and trying to, make a friend, shake a hand, make a friend. You were so busy developing schemes in the front of your brain for doing that you didn't have time to pay attention to what you were allowing to seep into and become collected by your subconscious mind. So when you sit still, as you do at night, in the recesses of your own house, in the dark, with nobody whispering into your ear next to you, you have time now to revisit and reevaluate those values and those concerns that you have, that others have, the relationships and the responsibilities that you have for other people and with other people. You have a chance at night to reevaluate all of that. So that's going to stir up in you certain emotional feelings and tendencies. That's the moon in you. You know, they say that the full moon pulls the tides of this planet. That's what they say. The jury is still out on that, but that's what they surmise. So what is that saying? It is saying that when your emotionality is shining brightly, that it's going to have a pull on the waters of your reality. What are those waters? Your feelings. Those waters are your emotions. Those waters are how you evaluate things morally in order to decide whether this is a good thing to hold on to, a good person to get into a relationship with, a good interest to invest in. Your moral mind is making those decisions. And it's based first and foremost on how you feel about that thing, how you feel about that venture, that relationship, or how you feel about that person. That's the moon shining in you, waxing and waning, becoming more intense and then less intense, and maybe even null and void. As the moon tends to do at least one night of the month, it disappears altogether. So those aspects of the human mind, the rational mind and the emotional mind, they're supposed to be working in concert with each other. They're supposed to be working together, but they will only work together peacefully. And I put that in quotation marks because we're talking still about Salima and Salaam, peace. The only way those two varying aspects of your mind's capacity can work together in peace is if the emotional mind learns to submit to the greater light of the sun, the rational mind. Let me repeat that. One of the reasons why there's not chaos in the sky is because the moon understands its subservient position to the sun. It understands that its light, as they tell us, is actually a product of the reflection of light coming from the bigger body of light, the sun. So the moon's ability to give itself into reflection based on the light of the greater body is what keeps those bodies orderly and operating in a peaceful fashion, which allows that aspect of the heavens to remain whole, non-chaotic. So if you want to remain non-chaotic or to become non-chaotic, many of us are living chaotic lives as we speak, you first have to learn the technique or the science, if you will, of allowing your emotionality to submit to the better judgment of your rational mind. The uniting of these two in a way which gives the rational mind leadership over the emotional tendencies is what is responsible for rulership in your human vessel. You have to discipline yourself in a way that allows your rational mind to have the leadership role over the emotional tendencies. If you allow your emotional mind to have the jump on and the advantage over your rational processing of information, you're going to live a muck and mire type of life. It's going to be hellish for you. It's going to be non-stop aggravation and confusion in your life. So if you're going through these things, it's because you're doing what I'm asking you not to do. You're doing what I'm asking you to reevaluate in yourself that you're doing. And all you have to do is switch tracks. That's on you, partner. All you have to do is decide one day that I'm going to wake up and be different. Or from this moment that I'm learning this, I'm going to do things. I'm going to behave different. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to go in there and talk to my wife different. I've been hollering at her, cussing and fussing at her about dinner being late or whatever, or her period being late, the girlfriend, boyfriend. But wasn't it supposed to come this week? And we live our lives wrapped around the finger of emotionality with no rational sense attached. All you have to do is switch tracks and decide that you're going to do what Elijah Muhammad said. Think 5 times before you act. Think 5 times before you speak. And Mr. Elijah Muhammad said, then perhaps you will be thinking and acting correctly. Isn't that beautiful from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? Why you want to throw out the baby with the bathwater? Don't be stupid. Don't allow foreign interests to influence your rational decision making. That's another part of that emotions taking over the rational mind. So in love with foreign interests that we think are Islam and the true Muslim. And if they have an accent, it means they're correct in everything they tell you about the Qur'an and the Hadith and the this and that, Bukhari and the this and the that and the Ramadan and the way they do things, that's the way we think they're supposed to be done because we are judging them emotionally. We have an emotional attachment to foreign interests, and that tendency has to die in us. As Moses, called Musa in the Qur'an, told his people, you have to slay the heifer. Don't let me get started on that. You have to slay that heifer. They said, well, what she look like? What heifer you talking about? That's how we talk. What foreign interest you talking about here, man? We black like you. What do you mean foreign interest? What are you doing with the turban on? Weren't you born in Chicago? That foreign interest. What are you doing eating basmati rice every night for lunch and dinner? That your food? Is that the food that grows in the part of the world where your people come from? That foreign interest is what I'm talking about. Why are you wearing sandals outside in the dead of winter? You might as well just complete the package and give up your automobile and go find a camel or a donkey and park it outside of your projects. Whatever you do, you need to at least attempt to be complete. If you intend to call yourself a Muslim. Yeah, that might be a little bit harsh for some people, but not for this audience. I'm feeling y'all. I know where you are. All right, let's continue.